When people talk about Christians, confusion often arises. People think there is only one way of being Christian, or they think the opposite, that divisions have destroyed everything. The truth, as often happens, is both simpler and deeper at the same time. Christians are one, but they are not uniform. From the very beginning, Christianity has been unity in difference. The first disciples were already different. Peter was impulsive, John contemplative, Thomas rational and doubtful. Paul was an intellectual, Barnabas a mediator, James a practical man. And they did not always agree. They argued, they disagreed. Sometimes they clashed sharply. Yet before Jesus they remained united. This is a decisive key. Christian unity does not arise from the absence of conflict. It arises from a center stronger than division. That center has a name, Jesus Christ, true God and true man. Over the centuries, however, history becomes more complex. Communities grow, cultures change, languages multiply. And what at first was simply diversity of sensitivity gradually becomes institutional division as well. Thus the great Christian families are born, not as sudden betrayals, but as historical fractures, often painful, often misunderstood, often marked by human sin. Let us begin with Catholics. Catholicism places one fundamental thing at the center: sacramentality. For Catholics, God does not save from a distance. He saves through concrete signs. Water, bread, wine, oil, hands, words. Grace passes through matter. Catholicism believes that Christ entrusted the Church with a visible structure, a hierarchy, not as worldly power, but as service to unity. This is why there is the Pope as a sign of communion, not because he is holier than others, but because he safeguards the unity of faith. The Catholic lives the faith within a great historical continuity. Saints, councils, tradition, liturgy, a faith that crosses centuries. Then there are the Orthodox. Here the heart beats differently. Orthodoxy places tradition at the center, not as habit, but as transmitted life. For the Orthodox believer, faith is above all an experience of mystery. The liturgy is heaven on earth. Icons are not decorative images. They are windows onto eternity. Orthodoxy mistrusts overly rational definitions. It prefers silence, contemplation, the prayer of the heart. The Orthodox do not recognize the Pope as a universal authority, not out of rebellion, but due to a different understanding of authority, more collegial, more synodal. Yet when an Orthodox Christian proclaims the Creed, he says the same essential things. Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He became incarnate. He died. He rose again. Then come the Protestants. Here the historical fracture is more evident. It emerges in the 16th century. In a context of crisis, corruption, and abuses, Protestantism places Scripture at the center. The Bible as the ultimate criterion. The Bible as the word that judges the Church, not the other way around. The Protestant fears a faith weighed down, a faith covered by too many mediations. He seeks a return to the essential. For this reason, the number of sacraments is reduced. For this reason, Mary and the saints are viewed with suspicion, not out of contempt, but out of fear of obscuring Christ. In Protestantism, there is a strong emphasis on personal conscience, on a direct relationship with God, on individual responsibility. Alongside historical Protestants, Evangelicals then emerge. Here the tone changes again. Evangelicals insist on a personal encounter with Jesus, on conversion, on decision. Faith, for an evangelical, is not inherited. It is chosen. It is a before and an after. The Bible is central. Preaching is central. The community is very alive. Less ritual, more spontaneity, more direct language. And then, for example, there are Coptic Christians, one of the oldest Christian communities of all. Born in Egypt in the very first centuries, the Copts carry on their bodies and in their history the mark of persecution. They are Christians of martyrdom, of silent fidelity. Their liturgy is ancient. Their faith is simple and radical. Christ at the center. Christ to the end. And here we reach the decisive point. Despite all these differences, despite the wounds of history, despite real divisions over sacraments, Mary, the Pope, authority, one thing remains: all these Christians believe in the same person, Jesus Christ, true God and true man, crucified, risen. He is the center. He is the one who holds together what history has separated. He is the one who makes the Church a reality greater than its fractures. The Church of Christ does not perfectly coincide with a single institution, but it lives in all those who confess His name, who entrust themselves to Him, who recognize Him as Lord. And so it must be said clearly: divisions among Christians are a wound, not a richness to display, not something to boast about. Jesus Himself prayed that they might be one. And every division contradicts, at least in part, that desire. But reducing everything to scandal would be superficial, because God knows how to write straight on crooked lines. And in the history of Christian divisions, there is also a mystery. Each great Christian family has preserved an essential aspect of the gospel, as if the mystery of Christ were too great to be contained in a single form. Catholicism has preserved the visibility of the Church, the fact that faith is not only interior, that it has a body, a history, a continuity. Orthodoxy has preserved the sense of mystery, the fact that God is never fully graspable, that faith is not only explanation, but adoration, that before God one falls silent before speaking. Protestantism has preserved the power of the Word, the primacy of Scripture, the constant call not to turn the gospel into dead tradition, to allow oneself always to be judged by the Word. Evangelicals have preserved the urgency of decision, the fact that faith is not automatic, that it is not enough to be born into a Christian context, that at a certain point one must respond personally. The Copts have preserved fidelity unto blood. Christianity lived without protections, without privileges, with the awareness that following Christ may cost one's life. Seen this way, these worlds are not only divided, they are also complementary, like different voices in the same choir, which today sings in dissonance, but one day will find harmony again. And here we return to a decisive point. Christian unity is not uniformity. It is not thinking all the same way. It is not erasing differences. Christian unity is communion. It is recognizing one another as brothers while remaining different. It is knowing that what unites us is infinitely greater than what divides us. The apostles had already understood this. Peter and Paul did not agree on everything. At times they even confronted each other directly. Yet neither ever questioned Christ. Christ was the center. Not one's own idea, not one's own sensitivity, not one's own role. When Christ remains the center, diversity does not destroy, it enriches. When the center shifts, even apparent unity becomes fragile. Today, we live in a paradoxical time. On the one hand, Christians are still divided. On the other, in a secularized world, they appear increasingly similar. Before a world that no longer believes, before a world that often mocks faith, before a world that reduces man to function, Christians of every confession find themselves on the same side, defending the dignity of the person, the value of life, freedom of conscience, hope against nihilism. It is as if history were revealing a deep truth. Before structures, before theological differences, there is a shared faith, believing that God became man, that he passed through death, that he rose again, and that he continues to call humanity to life. Whoever believes this is already within the Church of Christ, even if they live it in different forms. Perhaps future unity will not be born from great political or theological agreements. Perhaps it will be born from true disciples, from men and women who, in every confession, live the gospel fully. When you meet a Christian who truly loves, who truly forgives, who truly hopes, labels become secondary. What remains is Christ. His light remains. His voice remains. And so, yes, Christians are divided, but they are not separated from Christ. And as long as they remain attached to him, even in their differences, they will continue to be together, the Church of Christ in the world.